Dive into a thrilling billionaire romance filled with secrets, betrayal, and forbidden love. Elara, a bookstore owner, signs a risky marriage contract with enigmatic billionaire Thorne to save her legacy. But when a coded manuscript reveals a deadly conspiracy tied to her mother's murder and Thorne's tragic past, danger closes in. From glamorous Vancouver galas to a heart-pounding yacht showdown, will their love survive the lies? Watch to uncover the truth in this gripping tale of passion and revenge. Don't miss a second. Stay tuned for every twist. Before we dive into this roller coaster of romance and suspense, hit that subscribe button and tap the bell icon so you never miss a single tale. Your support keeps this channel alive, and we love hearing from you. At the end, drop a comment telling us what you loved most about Elara and Thorne's journey. What story you'd love to see next. Your voice matters to us. Let's build an amazing, engaged community together. A single note slipped under the door, its words a chilling warning. Leave his world or lose everything. But Elara Davis had already signed her fate away. Elara sat alone in the back room of her bookstore, the forgotten pages, surrounded by towering shelves of ancient manuscripts and leather-bound tomes. The scent of old paper and ink filled the air, a bittersweet reminder of her mother's legacy. Rain lashed against the windows of the shop, nestled in Vancouver's historic Gastown district, the steady patter echoing the turmoil in her heart. She stared at a pile of unpaid bills, their red-stamped warnings glaring like accusations. Her mother had built this haven for rare books, a place where stories from centuries past lived on. But now it was crumbling under the weight of debts Elara couldn't pay. Her fingers traced the edge of a final notice from the bank. 1 week until the auction that would strip her of everything. She leaned back in her worn leather chair, rubbing her temples. How had it come to this? Her mother's death 5 years ago had left her with the shop and a promise to keep it alive. But the world didn't care about promises. Suppliers had turned their backs, one even vanishing with a deposit for a shipment of rare first editions that never arrived. Betrayal stung worse than the numbers on the page. Elara's hazel eyes, flecked with gold, scanned the room, landing on a framed photo of her mother, smiling in front of the shop's grand opening sign. "I'm sorry, Mom," she whispered, her voice breaking. "I tried." The bell above the doctor chimed, cutting through her thoughts. She straightened, hoping for a customer. Any sale would help. But it was only Marcus, her part-time assistant and a family friend since she was a kid. His graying hair was damp from the rain, his expression heavy with concern as he shook off his coat. "Elara, you look like you haven't slept in days. Any luck with the banks?" She forced a smile, but it felt hollow. "No luck, Marcus. They say rare books are a dying market. Too risky." Her voice trembled as she gestured to the bills. "The auction's next week. If I don't find a way, they'll take everything. Every book, every shelf, every piece of Mom's dream." Marcus pulled up a stool, his weathered hands clasped together. "Your mom would be proud of how hard you fought. But maybe it's time to think about selling some inventory. That first edition Dickens could fetch a good price." Elara shook her head, her dark curls bouncing. "I can't. These books aren't just products, they're history. Mom always said each one held a story worth saving." Her words were firm, but doubt gnawed at her. The shop was bleeding money and she was out of options. Marcus sighed, his silence louder than words. Later that evening, as Elara locked up, her phone buzzed with an email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read, "A proposal to save your legacy." Her heart skipped. She opened it, scanning. The words, "Meet me at the Seaside Lounge, 8 p.m. I have a solution to your troubles. T. Harlow." Thorne Harlow. The name sent a chill down her spine. Everyone in Vancouver knew him. A billionaire whose tech empire dominated the maritime industry. A man whose charm and scandals filled tabloid headlines. Why would someone like him care about her failing bookstore? Against her better judgment, Elara found herself at the Seaside Lounge, a sleek bar overlooking the Pacific. The place screamed wealth, polished mahogany, crystal chandeliers, and a view of the rain-slicked city skyline. She smoothed her navy dress, feeling out of place among the elite sipping overpriced cocktails. Then she saw him. Thorne stood by, a private booth, his tailored suit hugging his broad frame, dark hair slightly tousled, and piercing blue eyes locking onto her the moment she entered. He was taller than she'd expected, exuding a quiet intensity that made her pulse quicken. "You're late," Thorne said, his voice smooth but edged with amusement as he gestured to the seat across from him. Elara slid into the booth, forcing herself to meet his gaze. "Your email was vague. I don't make a habit of meeting strangers who claim they can fix my life." A smirk tugged at his lips. "Fair enough. But I'm not a stranger, Elara. I know about your bookstore, your debts, the auction, and I can make it all go away." She crossed her arms, wary. "Why would you care about a failing shop in Gastown? What's in it for you?" Thorne leaned forward, his fingers tracing the rim of his whiskey glass. "I need something you can provide, a business arrangement. 1 year, no strings, no emotions. In return, I'll pay off every cent you owe and ensure the forgotten pages stays yours." Elara's breath caught. "What kind of arrangement?" "A marriage," he said simply, his eyes never leaving hers. "My father's will demands I marry within a month to inherit the Harlow Empire. I need a wife, someone discreet, someone who won't get attached. You need money. It's a win-win." Her stomach twisted. Marriage? To him? The idea was absurd, yet the weight of her reality pressed down harder. "You're serious," she said, voice barely above a whisper. "Deadly," Thorne replied, sliding a folder across the table. "The contract's all there. 1 year, $10 million, your debts erased. No intimacy unless you want it. Just play the part." Elara stared at the folder, her hands trembling. She wanted to laugh, to walk away, but the image of her mother's photo flashed in her mind. "Why me?" she asked, her voice sharp. "You could have anyone." He studied her, as if weighing whether to answer. "Because you're desperate enough to say yes, but strong enough to handle my world. Most women would crumble. You won't." Elara's nails dug into her palms. He was right, she was desperate. But his confidence, his certainty, grated on her. "You don't know me," she snapped. "I know enough," he murmured, leaning back. "Sign it, Elara. Save your legacy." She grabbed the pen, her heart pounding. The ink felt like a betrayal as she scrawled her name. Thorne's eyes gleamed as he tucked the contract away. "Welcome to my world, Mrs. Harlow," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Buckle up." The next morning, Elara woke to her face splashed across every news site. Billionaire Thorne Harlow, engaged to unknown bookstore owner. Reporters swarmed the forgotten pages, digging into her past, her mother's legacy, her failures. She stood frozen behind the counter, her phone buzzing with notifications. Thorne, unfazed, texted her, "Get used to it. This is just the beginning." But as she locked the shop that night, a chill ran through her. A note slipped under the door, written in sharp, hurried script. "You don't belong in his world. Leave now, or you'll regret it." Her breath hitched. Who knew about the contract? And why did they want her gone? As she clutched the note, Elara realized she'd stepped into something far bigger and far more dangerous than she'd ever imagined. What had she just signed up for? A shadow watched from across the street, eyes fixed on Elara as she clutched the threatening note. Someone knew her secret, and they weren't playing games. Elara stood in the guest bedroom of Thorne's waterfront penthouse, her reflection staring back from a floor-to-ceiling mirror. The space was a study in opulence. Sleek black furniture, a chandelier dripping with crystals, and a view of Vancouver's harbor shimmering under the morning mist. She smoothed the emerald green gown his assistant had delivered, its silk clinging to her curves like a second skin. It felt wrong, like she was stepping into someone else's life, someone glamorous, someone fearless, someone who wasn't drowning in debt and doubt. Last night's note still burned in her mind. You don't belong in his world. Her fingers tightened around the dress's hem. Who had left it? And how did they know about the contract? She pushed the thought aside as her phone buzzed. A text from Thorne. "Car's waiting. Don't keep me waiting too." His tone, even in text, carried that infuriating mix of command and charm. Elara grabbed her clutch, her heels clicking on the marble floor as she headed downstairs. The city outside was alive with the hum of traffic and the salty tang of the Pacific. But inside Thorne's world, everything felt sharper, more dangerous. A black limo idled at the curb, and there he was, leaning against it, his dark suit tailored to perfection, his blue eyes scanning her with an intensity that made her breath catch. "You clean up well," Thorne said, his lips curving into a half smirk as he opened the door for her. Elara slid into the leather seat, ignoring the flutter in her chest. "I'm here to play my part, not to win your approval." His chuckle was low, almost dangerous. "Good. Because tonight, you'll need to be more than just a pretty face." The limo wove through Vancouver's streets, heading toward the Pacific Grand Hotel, a historic landmark where the city's elite gathered for the annual maritime gala. Elara's stomach churned. She wasn't ready for this. Flashing cameras, judgmental stares, a world where every smile hid a knife. "What am I walking into?" she asked, her voice quieter than she intended. Thorne's gaze flicked to the window, his jaw tightening. "A room full of sharks. They'll smell blood if you show weakness. Stay close, smile, and don't answer their questions." "Easy for you to say," she muttered. "You're used to this." He turned to her, his eyes unreadable. "No one gets used to this, Elara. You just learn to survive it." The hotel's ballroom was a spectacle of wealth. Gold chandeliers casting warm light over tables draped in white linen, champagne flutes clinking, and designer gowns glittering like stars. Elara felt every eye on her as she stepped inside, Thorne's hand resting lightly on her lower back. The whispers started immediately, curious, cutting, cruel. Who is she? Harlow's latest fling? Some nobody from Gastown? She straightened her spine, forcing a smile, but her heart pounded. Then she saw her. Isolde Kane glided through the crowd, her crimson gown hugging her tall, elegant frame, her blonde hair swept up to accentuate sharp cheekbones. Her green eyes locked onto Elara with a venom that made her skin prickle. "Well, well," Isolde purred, stopping in front of them, a flute of champagne in her hand. "Thorne, you didn't tell me you'd traded up for like this." Her gaze raked over Elara, dripping with disdain. Alara's cheeks burned, but she held her ground. "Funny, I was about to say the same about you." Isolde's smile tightened, her eyes flashing. "Careful, darling. You're playing in a world you don't understand." Thorne's fingers pressed harder against Elara's back, a silent warning. "Isolde," he said, his voice smooth but cold. "Still bitter, I see." Isolde let out a low, humorless laugh. "Oh, I'm over you, darling. But I'm curious. Does she know what she signed up for?" She leaned closer to Elara, her perfume sharp and expensive. "He's not the savior you think he is." Before Elara could respond, a new voice cut through the tension. "Thorne, we need to talk." A man approached, his dark hair slightly tousled, his black suit sharp but worn with a casual defiance. Ronan Vale, Thorne's half-brother, carried himself with an air of quiet menace. Elara had read about him, once in line to inherit part of the Harlow Empire before Thorne outmaneuvered him. The bad blood between them was practically legend. Ronan's dark eyes flicked to Elara, a smirk playing on his lips. "And you must be the new pawn in his game." "Hope you know what you're doing, sweetheart," Elara bristled. "I'm not anyone's pawn." His smirk widened. "We'll see." He turned to Thorne, his tone hardening. "We need to talk, alone." Thorne hesitated, his hand lingering on Elara's back. "Stay here," he murmured to her. "I won't be long." He followed Ronan through the crowd, leaving Elara with Isolde's mocking gaze. "You poor thing," Isolde said, her voice dripping with false sympathy. "He hasn't told you, has he?" Elara narrowed her eyes. "Told me what?" Isolde stepped closer, her smile sharp as a blade. "That being Thorne's wife is a death sentence. Everyone who gets close to him ends up broken, or worse." She turned and glided away, her words hanging in the air like poison. Elara's pulse raced. She needed air, space, anything to clear her head. She made her way to the bar, ordering a glass of wine to steady her nerves. The bartender slid it over with a sympathetic smile. But before she could take a sip, a presence loomed behind her. "Scared yet?" Ronan's voice was low, his breath warm against her ear. She spun around, meeting his unreadable gaze. "I don't scare easily," he chuckled, taking a sip of his drink. "You should. Thorne's not what he seems. Run while you still can." Elara held his stare, refusing to flinch. "I don't run." "We'll see," he said, his smirk infuriatingly smug. Before she could fire back, Thorne returned, his expression tight. "We're leaving," he said, his hand finding hers. His grip was firm, almost possessive, as he led her toward the exit. The cameras flashed again, but Thorne ignored them, pulling her into the waiting limo. The moment the door closed, Elara turned to him. "What's going on?" she demanded. "What did Ronan want?" Thorne didn't answer right away, his jaw clenched as he stared out the window. Finally, he spoke, his voice low. "He knows about the contract." Elara's blood ran cold. "How?" "I don't know," Thorne said, his eyes meeting hers, dark and turbulent. "But someone's talking, and they're not done with us." Back at the penthouse, Elara couldn't sleep. The note from last night, Isolde's warning, Ronan's cryptic threats, they swirled in her mind like a storm. She slipped out of bed, pacing the living room, the city lights casting eerie shadows. Then she saw it. Another note, tucked into her coat pocket. Her hands trembled as she unfolded it. "You signed your life away. Stop digging or you'll drown." Her breath caught. Someone was watching her, someone close. But who? And what did they know about Thorne's past that made them so desperate to keep her away? A storm raged outside, but the real tempest was brewing inside Elara. Someone was watching her every move, and they knew secrets she hadn't even begun to unravel. Elara stood in the living room of Thorne's penthouse, the rain hammering against the massive windows overlooking Vancouver's harbor. The city's lights blurred into streaks of gold and silver through the downpour, but her focus was on the crumpled note in her hand. "Stop digging, or you'll drown." Her heart pounded as she reread it, the words sharp and deliberate, like a blade pressed to her throat. Who was sending these threats? And what did they know about her deal with Thorne? She shoved the note into her pocket, her mind racing. The contract she'd signed was supposed to be a lifeline, a way to save the forgotten pages. But now it felt like a noose tightening around her neck. The penthouse door clicked open, and Thorne stepped inside, his dark hair damp from the rain, his suit jacket slung over one shoulder. His blue eyes found her immediately, narrowing as he caught the tension in her posture. "You look like you've seen a ghost," he said, tossing his jacket onto a chair and crossing the room. His voice was casual, but there was an edge to it, like he could sense the storm brewing inside her. Elara hesitated, her fingers twitching, toward the note in her pocket. Should she tell him? The weight of Isolde's warning and Ronan's cryptic threats from the gala still lingered, but this felt different. Personal. "I got another note," she said finally, her voice steady. Despite the fear clawing at her chest, she pulled it out, holding it up for him to see. "Someone doesn't want me here, Thorne. And they know about the contract." His expression darkened as he snatched the note, his eyes scanning the words. For a moment, he was silent, his jaw tight, his fingers crumpling the paper's edge. "This isn't a game," he said, his voice low and dangerous. "Whoever's doing this, they're closer than we think." "Closer?" Elara's voice rose, frustration spilling over. "Like who? Isolde? Ronan? Or is there something you're not telling me?" She stepped toward him, her hazel eyes blazing. "You dragged me into your world, Thorne. If there's something I need to know, tell me now." He ran a hand through his hair, his gaze flickering to the window as if the answers were hidden in the storm. "You want the truth?" he said finally, turning to face her. His voice was quieter now, almost raw. "Fine. But once you hear it, there's no going back." Elara's breath caught. "Try me." Thorne exhaled, moving to the bar cart and pouring himself a whiskey. The ice clinked against the glass, the sound sharp in the tense silence. "I had a sister," he said, his back to her. "Mira, my twin. She died 17 years ago in a boating accident off the coast of Vancouver Island. Except it wasn't an accident." Elara's heart stuttered. A twin? He'd never mentioned her, not once. "What happened?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Thorne turned, his eyes haunted, the whiskey glass forgotten in his hand. "Mira was brilliant, Elara. Obsessed with stories. Just like you. Not just books, but the secrets they held. She spent her summers working at a rare books archive, digging through manuscripts no one else cared about. One day, she found something. Something dangerous. A coded message hidden in an old maritime logbook, tucked away in a collection your mother owned." Elara froze, her mind reeling. "My mother's collection? You mean the forgotten pages?" Thorne nodded, his expression grim. "The logbook was from a defunct shipping company tied to my family's empire. Mira thought it was just a historical curiosity at first, but the code, it pointed to corruption, bribes, deals that went bad. She was frantic when she told me about it, said she'd found proof someone was covering it up. The next day, she went out on that boat. It sank. No survivors." Elara's stomach twisted. "You think someone killed her because of what she found?" "I don't think," Thorne said, his voice hard. "I know. The police called it an accident. Mechanical failure. Bad weather. But Mira was careful. She wouldn't have gone. Out in a storm. Someone made sure she didn't come back." Elara sank onto the couch, her legs unsteady. "And my mother? You think this has something to do with her death?" Thorne set the glass down, his movements deliberate. "Your mother died of a sudden illness, didn't she? A rare toxin, misdiagnosed as a heart condition. I've seen the reports, Elara. It wasn't natural. Whoever silenced Mira didn't stop there. They went after anyone connected to that logbook." Her breath hitched. Her mother's death had always felt wrong. Too sudden, too unexplained. But she'd buried her suspicions under grief. Now, they clawed their way back. "Why didn't you tell me?" she demanded, standing again, her hands clenched into fists. "You married me, dragged me into this, and didn't think to mention my mother might have been murdered?" Thorne's eyes flashed, a mix of frustration and something softer. "Regret, maybe. Because I didn't know for sure. Not until you signed that contract. I needed you close, Elara. Not just for the inheritance. That logbook, it's still out there, somewhere in your shop, and you're the only one who might know where it is." Her mind spun. The contract, the marriage, the threats. It was all connected to a secret buried in her bookstore. "You used me," she said, her voice shaking with anger. "This wasn't about saving my shop. It was about your sister, your revenge." Thorne stepped closer, his presence overwhelming, his voice low. "Maybe it started that way. But you're not just a means to an end, Elara. Not anymore." His fingers brushed her arm, a fleeting touch that sent a shiver through her. "I need you to trust me." "Trust you?" She laughed, bitter and sharp. "You hid this from me. You hid a clause in that contract that could take my shop if I walk away. How am I supposed to trust you?" His jaw tightened, but he didn't look away. "Read the fine print again. It's not what you think." Elara stormed to the desk where she'd left a copy of the contract, her hands trembling as she flipped through the pages. There it was, buried in legal jargon. In the event the marriage is terminated before 1 year, all assets of the forgotten pages transfer to Thorne Harlow. Her blood ran cold. "You planned this," she whispered, turning to him. "You knew I'd never last a year in your world." Thorne's expression softened, but his voice was firm. "I didn't plan for you to fail. I planned for you to stay." He took a step closer, his eyes searching hers. "You're stronger than you realize, Elara. But someone out there doesn't want you digging into this. And they're not going to stop." Before she could respond, a crash echoed from the hallway, a glass shattering against the floor. Elara spun toward the sound, her heart leaping into her throat. Thorne moved faster, positioning himself between her and the door. "Stay here," he ordered, his voice deadly calm as he reached for something in his jacket. A gun. Elara's pulse roared in her ears. "Thorne, what's—" "Quiet," he hissed, his eyes scanning the shadows. The lights flickered, plunging, the penthouse into darkness. A low, cold voice slithered through the room. "You should have listened to the notes, Elara. The words were a whisper, chilling and close, but no one was there. Her breath caught as Thorne tightened his grip. On the gun, his body a shield. Whoever was out there, they weren't just watching, they were inside. What secret was worth killing for? A hacker's keystrokes echoed in the dark, exposing Elara's secrets to the world. But the real betrayal was closer than she dared to imagine. Elara's hands shook as she stood in Thorne's penthouse, the Vancouver skyline a blur through the rain-streaked windows. The chilling voice from last night still rang in her ears. "You should have listened to the notes, Elara." The lights had flickered back on moments later, revealing an empty hallway, but the fear lingered like a shadow. Whoever was behind the threatening notes had been inside, close enough to whisper, close enough to strike. She hadn't slept, her mind replaying Thorne's revelation about his twin sister Mira and the coded manuscript tied to her mother's death. The forgotten pages, her bookstore, wasn't just a business. It was a vault of secrets someone was desperate to keep buried. Thorne stood by the fireplace, his phone pressed to his ear. His voice clipped as he barked orders to his security team. "Find out how they got in. I want cameras checked, locks changed, now." He hung up, his blue eyes meeting Elara's, a storm brewing beneath their surface. "You okay?" he asked, softer than she expected. She crossed her arms, trying to hide the tremble in her hands. "No, Thorne, I'm not okay. Someone broke into your penthouse, whispered threats in the dark, and you're acting like it's just another Tuesday." He stepped closer, his presence steadying despite her frustration. "It's not just another Tuesday, but panicking won't help. We need to figure out who's doing this." "Like Isolde?" Elara snapped, her voice sharp. "Or Ronan? Or someone else you haven't bothered to mention?" Thorne's jaw tightened, but before he could respond, Elara's phone buzzed violently on the coffee table. She grabbed it, her heart sinking as she saw the notifications flooding in, hundreds of them. Social media tags, news alerts, emails. Her fingers fumbled as she opened one. A headline screamed, "Billionaire's bride or gold digger." Leaked emails. Expose Elara's true motives, her breath caught. She clicked the link, her stomach churning as she read snippets of private emails. Hers, but twisted, spliced, manipulated to paint her as a schemer who'd trapped Thorne for his fortune. "This isn't me," she whispered, her voice breaking, as she scrolled through the article. "These emails, they're fake. Someone's hacked my account, changed my words." Thorne leaned over her shoulder, his expression darkening as he read. "This is no amateur job," he said, his voice low. "Someone with access, with resources. They're trying to destroy you." Elara's eyes stung with tears, but she blinked them back. "Destroy me? Why? I'm nobody. I'm just a bookstore owner who signed your stupid contract." "You're not nobody," Thorne said, his voice fierce. "You're my wife, and that makes you a target." He grabbed his phone, dialing fast. "Get me the PR team. I want a press conference today." Elara stared at him, her heart pounding. "A press conference? Thorne, this is my life falling apart. You can't just—" "I can," he cut in, his eyes locking onto hers. "And I will. They want to drag your name through the mud? They'll have to go through me first." By noon, Thorne stood in front of a swarm of reporters outside the Pacific Grand Hotel, cameras flashing like a storm. Elara watched from the sidelines, her navy coat pulled tight against the chill. Thorne's voice was steady, unshaken. "My wife, Elara, is being targeted by a malicious campaign," he said, his gaze sweeping the crowd. "These leaks are fabricated, a calculated attack to undermine her. I won't stand for it. We're launching a full investigation, and those responsible will face consequences." The crowd erupted with questions, but Thorne didn't flinch. "Is the marriage real?" one reporter shouted. "Or just a ploy to secure your inheritance?" Thorne's eyes found Elara's, a flicker of something raw passing between them. "It's real," he said, his voice firm. "And anyone who comes after her answers to me." Elara's chest tightened. He was putting everything on the line, his reputation, his empire, for her. But as the cameras flashed, Isolde's words echoed in her mind. Being Thorne's wife is a death sentence. She wanted to believe him, but doubt gnawed at her. Was he protecting her, or was this just another move in his game? Back at the penthouse, Elara couldn't sit still. She paced the living room, her phone still buzzing with hateful messages. Gold digger. Liar. Her bookstore's website had been hacked, defaced with vicious comments. She sank onto the couch, burying her face in her hands. "This is too much," she muttered. "I didn't sign up for this." Thorne sat across from her, his tie loosened, his sleeves rolled up. "You signed up for me," he said quietly. "And I'm not letting you go through this alone." She looked up, her eyes searching his. "Why are you doing this? You don't owe me anything. This marriage, it's just a deal." For a moment he didn't answer, his gaze intense, almost vulnerable. "Maybe it started that way," he said, his voice low. "But every time I look at you, it feels like more." His words hung between them, heavy and electric, pulling her closer despite her better judgment. Elara shook her head, breaking the spell. "I need to know what's in that manuscript," she said, standing. "If Mira found something in my mother's collection, I need to find it too." Thorne nodded, standing with her. "Then we start at your shop. But we do this together. No more running off alone." The forgotten pages felt different when Elara unlocked the door that afternoon. The familiar scent of old books now tinged with unease. Thorne followed her inside, his presence a quiet anchor as she moved to the back room, where her mother's private collection was stored. She pulled out a heavy wooden box, its lock rusted with age. "Mom kept her rarest finds here," she said, her fingers tracing the lid. "If that logbook's anywhere, it's in this." Thorne knelt beside her, his shoulder brushing hers. "What does it look like?" Elara hesitated, her memory foggy. She mentioned a maritime log once, bound in dark leather, with strange markings on the spine. She said it was worthless, but she never let anyone touch it. They sifted through the box, pulling out fragile manuscripts and yellowed pages. Elara's heart raced as she spotted it. A slim volume, its leather cover worn, the spine etched, with faint symbols that looked like a cipher. She opened it, her breath catching as she saw handwritten numbers and letters scrawled in the margins. "This is it," she whispered. "Mira's code." Thorne leaned closer, his eyes narrowing. "It's a ledger, but those markings, they're not random. They're a key to something." Before Elara could respond, her phone buzzed again. Another anonymous message. "You found it. Now stop, or the next leak buries you both." Her blood ran cold. She showed it to Thorne, whose expression turned lethal. "Someone's watching us," he said, his voice low, "and they know exactly what we're doing." Elara's hands trembled, but she clutched the logbook tighter. "Then we keep going," she said, her voice steady despite the fear. "If this is what got Mira killed, it's what'll lead us to the truth." Thorne's gaze softened, a flicker of admiration in his eyes. "You're braver than you know," he murmured, his hand brushing hers. The touch lingered, a spark in the dim light of the shop. But as they locked the store and stepped into the rain, a figure watched from across the street, their silhouette vanishing into the fog. Someone was one step ahead, and they weren't just leaking emails, they were playing for blood. What would they do when Elara and Thorne got too close? A thief slipped through the shadows of the forgotten pages. But the real theft was the truth Elara was about to uncover. Someone she loved was still alive, and they were her worst enemy. Elara's heart pounded as she clutched the leather-bound maritime logbook, its cryptic symbols glowing faintly under the dim light of her bookstore's back room. Vancouver's rain had slowed to a drizzle, but the air inside the forgotten pages felt heavy, charged with the weight of the secrets she and Thorne had unearthed. The anonymous message still burned in her mind. "You found it. Now stop, or the next leak buries you both." Someone knew they'd found the coded manuscript, the same one Mira had died for, the one tied to her mother's murder. Elara's fingers traced the worn cover, her hazel eyes scanning the shelves as if answers might leap from the shadows. She couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched. Thorne stood by the window, his silhouette sharp against the city's neon glow. His tie was undone, his sleeves rolled up, revealing the tension in his forearms. "We need to get this logbook somewhere safe," he said, his voice low but urgent. "If they're watching, they'll come for it." Elara nodded, her throat tight. "I know, but where? My shop's barely secure as it is." The forgotten pages had always been her sanctuary, but now it felt like a target, its creaky floors and narrow aisles hiding threats she couldn't see. "Then we move it tonight," Thorne said, turning to her. His blue eyes held hers, steady but fierce. "No more waiting. We can't risk losing this." Before she could agree, a sharp crash shattered the silence, a window breaking in the front of the shop. Elara's breath caught, and Thorne moved, instantly, pulling her behind a shelf. "Stay down," he whispered, his hand gripping hers, warm and grounding. Footsteps echoed, deliberate and slow, as glass crunched under heavy boots. Elara's pulse roared in her ears. Someone was inside. Thorne reached into his jacket, his fingers closing around the gun he'd carried since the penthouse intrusion. "Don't move," he mouthed, edging toward the door. Elara's heart screamed to follow, but she stayed put, her hands trembling as she clutched the logbook. The footsteps stopped, replaced by the sound of shelves being shoved, books tumbling to the floor. Whoever it was, they weren't here to browse. Minutes later, Thorne returned, his face grim. "They're gone. Took half your rare collection and smashed the rest." He gestured to the front room, where Elara's worst fears materialized. Shelves lay toppled, manuscripts torn, glass cases shattered. Her mother's legacy, her life's work, was in ruins. She sank to her knees, a sob catching in her throat. "Why?" she whispered, picking up a shredded page from a 17th century poetry collection. "Why do this?" Thorne knelt beside her, his hand hovering over her shoulder before settling gently. "Because they're scared," he said, his voice soft but firm. "You're getting close, Elara. That logbook, it's the key to everything." She looked up, tears blurring her vision. "Close to what? Mira's death? My mother's? I don't even know who's doing this." Thorne's jaw tightened, his eyes dark with something unspoken. "We'll find out. But we need to decode that logbook. It's our only lead." Elara wiped her eyes, forcing herself to stand. "Then let's do it. I'm not letting them win." Her voice shook, but the fire in her chest burned hotter than her grief. She wouldn't let her mother's memory be destroyed. They worked late into the night, poring over the logbook's cryptic markings under the flicker of a desk lamp. Elara's fingers traced the numbers and letters, her mother's lessons in cryptography coming back in fragments. "It's a substitution cipher," she said, her voice steadying as she found her rhythm. "But it's layered. Multiple keys. Mira was smart. She hid something big." Thorne leaned closer, his shoulder, brushing hers, the heat of his presence a quiet anchor. "What does it say?" he asked, his voice low, almost reverent. Elara frowned, scribbling translations on a notepad. "It's names, dates, payments. Looks like a ledger of bribes tied to a shipping company. Harlow Maritime." She glanced at him, her heart sinking. "Your family's company." Thorne's expression didn't change, but his hands clenched into fists. "Mira found this. That's why she died. Someone didn't want it exposed." Elara's mind raced, connecting dots she wasn't ready to face. "And my mother, she owned this logbook. If she knew about this, why didn't she tell me?" Before Thorne could answer, Elara's phone buzzed with a new message. Her stomach dropped as she opened it. "You're digging your own grave. Ask about your stepfather." The sender was anonymous, but the words hit like a punch. Her stepfather, Victor, had died years ago, or so she'd thought. He'd been a quiet man, a maritime historian who'd married her mother late in life. His death had been sudden, a car accident, but now doubt crept in. "Thorne," she said, her voice trembling as she showed him the message. "Victor, my stepfather. He's supposed to be dead. But this says he's not." Thorne's eyes narrowed, his hand resting on hers, steadying her. "What do you know about him?" Elara shook her head, memories flooding back. "He was kind, quiet, loved old books, just like Mom. But he worked with shipping records, knew a lot about your family's industry. If he's alive..." Her voice broke. "If he's behind this, he betrayed us. He betrayed my mother." Thorne stood, pacing the room, his mind working fast. If Victor's alive, he's the key. He knew about the logbook, maybe even helped Mira find it. And if he's the one sending these messages, then he killed her, Elara finished, her voice barely a whisper. And maybe my mother too. The weight of the realization crushed her. She'd grieved Victor, mourned him alongside her mother. But now the man she trusted was a ghost pulling strings from the shadows. Thorne stopped pacing, his gaze locking onto hers. "We'll find him," he said, his voice fierce. "But you need to be sure, Elara. This changes everything." "I know," she said, her hands clenching the logbook. "But I can't stop now. Not after this." She stood, her resolve hardening. But the air between them shifted. Thorne's eyes softened, and he stepped closer, his hand brushing her cheek, the touch fleeting but electric. "You don't have to do this alone," he murmured, his voice raw. "I'm here, Elara. Whether you trust me or not." Her breath caught, the warmth of his touch battling the storm in her heart. She wanted to push him away, to cling to her anger. But the way he looked at her, like she was more than a contract, made her falter. "Why does it feel like you're the only thing keeping me sane?" she whispered, almost to herself. Thorne's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "Because maybe I am." He leaned closer, his breath warm against her ear. "But don't get too comfortable. We're in deep now." Before she could respond, a sharp ping broke the moment, another message on her phone. She opened it, her blood turning to ice. "Victor's watching. He knows you have the book. Run, or you're next." The screen glowed in the dark shop, the words, a stark warning. Elara's eyes met Thorne's, fear and fury colliding. Someone was out there, waiting, and they were closing in. What would Victor do when he realized she wouldn't stop? A coded message in an ancient logbook held the truth. But as Elara got closer, a traitor's shadow loomed. Someone she trusted was about to strike. Elara's fingers trembled as she clutched her phone, the latest anonymous message searing into her mind. "Victor's watching. He knows you have the book. Run, or you're next." The words glowed in the dim light of the forgotten pages, where she and Thorne stood surrounded by the wreckage of the recent break-in. Vancouver's rain had stopped, leaving a damp chill that seeped into her bones, but the real cold came from the betrayal she couldn't shake. Her stepfather, Victor, was alive and orchestrating a campaign to destroy her. The maritime logbook, its cryptic code linking Mira's death to her mother's murder, was now her only weapon. But every step closer to the truth felt like a step toward a trap. Thorne paced the shop's back room, his blue eyes scanning the scattered manuscripts as if they might reveal the enemy hiding in plain sight. His gun lay on the desk, a stark reminder of the danger closing in. "We need to move," he said, his voice taut with urgency. "Victor knows we have the logbook. He'll come for it. Or for you." Elara's chest tightened, her hazel eyes meeting his. "I'm not running," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her. "If Victor's behind this, I want to face him. I want to know why he betrayed my mother." Thorne stopped, his gaze softening for a moment. "You're not alone in this, Elara, but we can't just charge in blind. We need a plan." She nodded, her resolve hardening. "Then we start with the logbook. If we can decode the rest, we'll know what Mira found and what Victor's hiding." They agreed to infiltrate a high-profile maritime industry event at Vancouver's port, where Ronan and Isolde were likely to be. Thorne suspected one, or both, was working with Victor, feeding him information. "Ronan's been too quiet," Thorne said, his voice low as they drove through the city's neon-lit streets. "And Isolde's playing her own game. We need to know who's pulling the strings." Elara gripped the logbook in her lap, its weight a constant reminder of the stakes. "You think they'll show their hand at this event?" Thorne's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "People like them can't resist a stage, and we'll be there to catch them when they slip." The event was held in a sleek warehouse-turned-venue at the harbor, its glass walls reflecting the shimmering water. Ships loomed in the distance, their lights cutting through the fog. Elara wore a black gown that hugged her frame, her dark curls swept up to blend with the elite crowd. Thorne, in a tailored tux, stayed close, his hand brushing hers as they navigated the sea of suits and champagne flutes. The air buzzed with wealth and ambition, but Elara felt the weight of every glance, every whisper. They weren't just here to mingle. They were hunting. Isolde appeared first, her crimson dress a beacon in the crowd. She approached with a smile that didn't reach her eyes, her blonde hair catching the light. "Elara, darling," she said, her voice syrupy with venom. "You're still playing the devoted wife, I see. How exhausting." Elara forced a smile, her nails digging into her palm. "Not as exhausting as pretending to be relevant, Isolde." Isolde's laugh was sharp, her green eyes narrowing. "Oh, you're feisty, but you're out of your depth. Thorne's world chews up girls like you." Thorne's hand tightened on Elara's arm, his voice cold. "Walk away, Isolde. You're embarrassing yourself." Before Isolde could retort, Ronan emerged from the crowd, his dark eyes glinting with something dangerous. "Thorne," he said, his tone clipped. "A word. Alone." Elara's stomach twisted, but Thorne's gaze flicked to her, a silent promise. "Stay here," he murmured, his fingers lingering on hers before he followed Ronan toward a quiet corner. Isolde seized the moment, leaning closer to Elara. "You really think you can trust him?" she whispered, her perfume sharp and cloying. "Ronan's offering me a deal, dirt on Thorne that could ruin him. Want in?" Elara's heart raced. Was Isolde lying, or was this a chance to learn more? "What kind of dirt?" she asked, keeping her voice neutral. Isolde smirked. "The kind that proves Thorne's not the hero you think. Meet me at the dockside bar in an hour, come alone." She slipped away, leaving Elara reeling. When Thorne returned, his expression was grim. "Ronan's trying to blackmail me," he said, his voice low. "Says he's got evidence I forged documents to secure the inheritance. He's working with someone who knows about the logbook." Elara's breath caught. "Victor?" "Maybe," Thorne said, his eyes scanning the room. "But we need to focus. Did you find anything in the logbook?" Back at the penthouse earlier, Elara had decoded another section of the cipher. A list of offshore accounts tied to Harlow Maritime, with payments to a name she didn't recognize. V. Kessler. "It's a money trail," she told him now, her voice hushed as they stood by a window overlooking the harbor. "Bribes, cover-ups, all linked to your family's company. Mira must have found this and it got her killed." Thorne's jaw clenched. "And your mother, she owned the logbook." Victor was a maritime historian. He could have been the one feeding her information, or silencing her. Elara's hands shook, the betrayal cutting deeper. "I need to know," she said, her voice breaking. "I need to face him." Thorne nodded, his hand finding hers, warm and steady. "Then we set a trap, but we do it my way." They agreed to follow Isolde's lead, suspecting she was a pawn in Victor's game. Elara met her at the dockside bar, a gritty spot smelling of salt and diesel. Isolde slid a USB drive across the table. "Proof," she said, her voice low. "Thorne's been lying to you. That logbook? He knew about it years ago." Elara's heart pounded, but she kept her face blank. "Why should I trust you?" Isolde leaned closer, her eyes gleaming. "Because I want him to fall. And you're the key." Elara pocketed the drive, her mind racing. Was Thorne playing her? Before she could ask more, her phone buzzed with another anonymous message. "Meet me at the old warehouse, Pier 7. Come alone." Her blood ran cold. It was Victor. She was sure of it. Against Thorne's warnings, Elara slipped away, driving to the abandoned warehouse under the cover of night. The air was thick with fog, the pier creaking under her steps. Inside, a figure waited in the shadows. Victor, his face older but unmistakable, his eyes cold. "You should have stopped, Elara," he said, his voice chillingly familiar. "Your mother didn't, and look where it got her." Elara's voice shook with rage. "You killed her. Why?" Victor's smile was cruel. "She got too close to the truth. Just like you." He stepped closer, a glint of metal in his hand. A knife. Elara backed away, her heart pounding. "You won't get away with this." "Oh, I already have," he said, his voice low. "But you're making it messy." Before he could move, headlights pierced the fog, Thorne's car. He'd followed her. Victor vanished into the shadows as Thorne burst in, his gun drawn. "Elara!" Thorne's voice was raw with fear as he pulled her close. "What the hell were you thinking?" She clung to him, her voice trembling. "He's alive, Thorne. And he's coming for us." As they sped away, Elara's phone buzzed again. "You escaped tonight. You won't next time." The message was from a new number, but the sender's intent was clear. Victor was closing in, and he wasn't alone. Who was? His ally, and what would they do when the trap snapped shut? A trap was set. But as Elara stepped onto the rain-slicked deck of the yacht, she realized the real danger wasn't the enemy she knew. It was the one she never saw coming. The fog hung thick over Vancouver's harbor, cloaking the city's lights in a ghostly haze. Elara's breath caught as she stood on the pier, the cold rain soaking through her jacket. The yacht loomed ahead, its sleek silhouette rocking gently on the waves, a beacon of wealth and danger. Thorne's plan was simple. Lure Ronan and Isolde to the yacht, confront them with the decoded logbook, and force a confession about their ties to Victor. The anonymous message, "You escaped tonight. You won't next time," still burned in Elara's mind, a warning that her stepfather was out there pulling strings. But tonight, they were flipping the script. Tonight, they'd end this. Thorne stood beside her, his dark hair damp, his blue eyes scanning the pier for any sign of trouble. His gun was tucked into his waistband, hidden under his coat, but the tension in his frame was unmistakable. "You sure about this?" he asked, his voice low, almost drowned by the rain. "Once we step on that yacht, there's no turning back." Elara's heart pounded, but she nodded, clutching the maritime logbook under her arm. Its cryptic code, bribes, offshore accounts, names tied to Harlow Maritime, had already cost Mira and her mother their lives. She wouldn't let it claim hers. "I'm sure," she said, her voice steady despite the fear clawing at her chest. "Victor's out there. Ronan and Isolde know something. We finish this tonight." Thorne's gaze softened, a flicker of something raw passing through his eyes. "You're braver than I deserve," he murmured, his hand brushing hers, warm, against the cold. "Stay close." They boarded the yacht, the deck slick under their feet. The interior was all polished wood and soft lighting, a stark contrast to the storm outside. Elara's pulse raced as they moved to the main cabin where Ronan and Isolde waited, summoned by a carefully worded message Thorne had sent. "We have the logbook. Meet us. Let's settle this." The air crackled with tension as the two stepped inside, Ronan's dark eyes glinting with suspicion, Isolde's crimson gown a slash of color in the dim light. "Well, this is dramatic," Isolde purred, leaning against a table, her smile sharp. "What's the game, Thorne? Dragging your little wife into another mess?" Elara bristled, stepping forward. "No games," she said, holding up the logbook. "This proves Harlow Maritime was built on bribes and blood. Mira found it, and it got her killed. My mother too, and you both know who's behind it." Ronan's smirk faltered, his hands clenching. "Careful, Elara. You're throwing accusations you can't back up." "Can't I?" she shot back, flipping open the logbook to reveal the decoded pages. Names, dates, payments, all tied to a man named V. Kessler. Sound familiar? Isolde's laugh was cold, her eyes flicking to Ronan. "She's grasping, darling. Let's go before this gets boring." Thorne stepped forward, his voice like steel. "You're not going anywhere. Kessler's a front and you know it. Oh, Victor's been pulling your strings, hasn't he?" Ronan's face darkened, his hand twitching toward his jacket. "You're out of your depth, brother. Victor's a ghost. You've got nothing." "Then why are you sweating?" Thorne said, his eyes narrowing. "Tell us what you know, or this logbook goes to the police." The cabin door slammed open, cutting through the tension. Victor stepped inside, his gray hair slicked back, his eyes cold and calculating. Elara's heart stopped. It was him, the man she'd mourned, the man who'd raised her after her mother's death. His presence was a betrayal that cut deeper than any knife. "Enough," Victor said, his voice chillingly calm. He held a gun, its barrel glinting in the light. "You should have listened, Elara. Your mother didn't, and it cost her everything." Elara's voice shook with rage. "You killed her, poisoned her, didn't you? And Mira, What did she ever do to you? Victor's smile was cruel, his eyes glinting with malice. Mira was a liability. She found the logbook, started asking questions about Harlow Maritime's dirty deals. Your mother was no better, always poking around in her precious books. I had to tie up loose ends. Thorne stepped in front of Elara, his gun drawn, his voice deadly. Drop it, Victor. You're done. Victor laughed, low and mocking. You think you can stop me? I've been running this game for years. Ronan, Isolde, they're just pawns. And you, Elara, were my insurance policy. Isolde's face paled, her eyes darting to Victor. You said we were partners, she hissed, stepping back. You promised me a cut. Victor's gaze didn't waver. You served your purpose. Now you're expendable. Ronan lunged, his hand reaching for a knife in his jacket, but Victor was faster. A shot rang out, and Ronan staggered, clutching his shoulder, blood seeping through his fingers. Elara screamed, her body frozen as chaos erupted. Isolde bolted for the door, but Thorne tackled her, pinning her to the floor. You're not going anywhere, he growled. Victor turned the gun on Elara, his eyes cold. Give me the logbook, he said, his voice steady. Or you join your mother. Elara's hands trembled, but she held the book tighter. You'll have to kill me first, she said, her voice breaking but defiant. Thorne's eyes flicked to her, a silent plea. Elara, don't... Before he could finish, sirens wailed in the distance, their sound cutting through the storm. Thorne's lips curved into a grim smile. You're out of time, Victor. I called the police before we boarded. Victor's face twisted with rage, but the sirens grew louder, lights flashing through the yacht's windows. He hesitated, then bolted for the deck, disappearing into the fog. Thorne cursed, helping Elara to her feet as he restrained Isolde with a zip tie from his pocket. Ronan groaned on the floor, clutching his wound, his eyes filled with defeat. We need to go after him, Elara said, her voice shaking but resolute. He can't get away. Thorne's hand found hers, his grip firm. We will, but not tonight. The police have the logbook's copies, and Isolde's spilling everything to save herself. Isolde glared, her voice venomous. You think this is over? Victor's got more allies than you know. Elara's heart sank, but Thorne's gaze was steady, his thumb brushing her knuckles. Let them come, he said, his voice low and fierce. We're not done yet. As the police swarmed the yacht, Elara clung to Thorne, the weight of Victor's betrayal crushing her. He'd escaped, but the truth was out. Mira's death, her mother's murder, the corruption in Harlow Maritime. The logbook was safe, and Ronan and Isolde were in custody, but Victor was still out there, a shadow waiting to strike. As Elara stepped off the yacht, the rain washing away the night's chaos, she felt Thorne's arm around her, steady and warm. But a new fear took root. Victor's final words echoed in her mind. You were my insurance policy. What else was he hiding, and who was helping him? The storm had passed, but as Elara stood on the windswept beach, Victor's final words echoed. You were my insurance policy. The truth was out, but could she and Thorne rebuild from the ashes of betrayal? The rain had stopped, leaving Vancouver's air crisp and salted with the scent of the Pacific. Elara stood on a secluded beach just outside the city, the waves lapping at her boots, the horizon glowing faintly with the first light of dawn. The maritime logbook, now safe with the authorities, had exposed the corruption that cost her mother and Mira their lives. Victor, her stepfather, was still out there, a fugitive slipping through the cracks after the chaos on the yacht. But Ronan and Isolde were in custody, their confessions unraveling the web of bribes and murders tied to Harlow Maritime. Elara's heart was heavy with the weight of betrayal, but there was a flicker of hope too, a warmth she hadn't expected, standing beside Thorne. He stood a few steps away, his dark hair tousled by the wind, his blue eyes fixed on the ocean. The contract that had bound them, the one-year marriage that saved her bookstore, was set to expire at midnight. The folder containing it sat in Elara's bag, its pages a reminder of the deal that had turned her life upside down. She glanced at him, her chest tightening. So, this is it, she said, her voice soft but steady. The contract ends tonight. What happens now? Thorne turned, his gaze meeting hers, raw and unguarded. What do you want to happen, Elara? His voice was low, almost hesitant. A far cry from the confident billionaire she'd met weeks ago. She laughed, a shaky sound that caught in her throat. I don't know. A month ago, I was just trying to save my shop. Now I've got reporters on my doorstep, a stepfather who's a murderer, and... She paused, her eyes searching his. And you. Thorne stepped closer, the sand crunching under his shoes. You never signed up for this, he said, his voice thick with something she couldn't quite name. Regret, maybe, or something deeper. The threats, the leaks, Victor. I dragged you into my mess. Elara shook her head, her dark curls catching the breeze. You didn't drag me. I signed that contract. And yeah, it's been hell, but... She swallowed, her voice softening. You were there, Thorne. Every time I thought I'd break, you didn't let me. His lips twitched, a faint smile breaking through. You didn't need me to hold you up. You're stronger than anyone I've ever met. He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek, the touch warm against the cool air. But I'm not letting you go, Elara. Not unless you tell me to. Her breath caught, the weight of his words settling in her chest. The contract had started as a cold transaction, 10 million to save the forgotten pages. But somewhere between the threats, the break-ins, and the nights decoding the logbook, it had become something real. She thought of her mother, of Mira, of the lives lost to greed. She thought of the moments with Thorne, his hand steadying hers, his voice pulling her back from the edge. What if I don't want you to go? She whispered, her eyes locked on his. Thorne's smile faded, replaced by something fierce, unguarded. Then we burn that damn contract, he said, his voice rough. And we start over, for real. Elara's heart pounded as she pulled the folder from her bag, its pages crinkling in her hands. They walked to a small fire pit on the beach, where driftwood crackled under flames Thorne had lit earlier. She opened the folder, staring at her signature, the ink that had bound her to him. You sure about this? She asked, her voice trembling, not with fear, but with hope. Never been surer, Thorne said, his hand covering hers as they held the contract over the fire. The flames caught the edges, curling them black, then gold. The paper burned, its ashes drifting into the night sky, a silent vow that this was no longer about deals or debts. It was about them. As the last embers faded, Thorne pulled her close, his lips brushing her forehead. No more games, he murmured. Just us. Elara leaned into him, the warmth of his embrace chasing away the chill. Just us, she echoed, her voice steady now, grounded by the weight of his promise. The next morning, Elara returned to the forgotten pages, the shop's broken shelves and shattered glass, a painful reminder of the break-in. But Thorne was there, sleeves rolled up, directing a team of contractors he'd hired to rebuild. You don't have to do this, she said, watching as he lifted a fallen bookcase with surprising ease. I want to, he said, brushing sawdust off his hands. Your mother's legacy deserves to live on. So do you. Elara smiled, her heart lighter than it had been in weeks. You're not half bad for a billionaire with a shady past, she teased, nudging his arm. He laughed, a sound that warmed her more than the morning sun. And you're not half bad for a bookstore owner who takes on killers. They worked side by side, sorting books, repairing shelves, planning a relaunch for the shop. Elara found a photo of her mother tucked in a drawer, her smile bright as she held a rare manuscript. She'd like you, Elara said, showing it to Thorne. She always said the best stories were the ones that surprised you. Thorne's eyes softened, his hand finding hers. Then let's write a good one. Weeks later, the shop reopened, its polished shelves gleaming, its windows sparkling with new glass. Customers filled the aisles, their voices mingling with the scent of old books. Elara stood behind the counter, her heart full, watching Thorne charm a group of readers with a story about a rare first edition. He caught her eye, winking, and she felt a rush of something new, something lasting. That evening, they took a small boat out on the harbor, the city's lights reflecting on the water like stars. Elara leaned against Thorne, the gentle rocking of the boat a contrast to the chaos they'd survived. "You think Victor's still out there?" she asked, her voice quiet, the question lingering like a shadow. Thorne's arm tightened around her. "If he is, he's alone now. Ronan and Isolde are talking, and the police have the logbook. He's got nowhere to run." Elara nodded, but a flicker of unease remained. Victor had been a ghost before. He could be again. Still, she looked at Thorne, his face lit by the soft glow of the water, and felt a certainty she hadn't known in years. "We're okay, aren't we?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. He turned to her, his eyes fierce with promise. "More than okay," he said, his lips brushing hers in a kiss that felt like a vow. "We're unstoppable." As the boat drifted, the horizon glowing with the promise of a new day, Elara felt the weight of her mother's loss, of Mira's tragedy transform into something lighter, hope, love, a future she'd never dared to dream. The past was behind them, but the story wasn't over. Not yet.